Greetings, scholars. My name is Sandy Deshawn, and this is my report for our Module 8 assignment, and it is on Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams was born Abigail Smith on November 11th, 1744. Her family lived in Weymouth, Massachusetts, a small town outside of Boston. The family consisted of her father, William Smith, mother, Elizabeth Quincy Smith, and her siblings, Mary, Betsy, and William. Abigail was born in between Mary and Betsy. Abigail's father, known as Parson Smith, was the local minister and was deeply loved by his parishioners. Parson Smith was one of a few ministers in the area that had attended college, graduating from Harvard. According to author Natalie Bober, Abigail was a small, frail child who was often sick. She didn't mind being sick, though, because she got to stay with her grandmother, who let her spend her time reading. Abigail loved to read, and some would consider that it is this early love of reading that developed her intellect and later her ability to write in such a commanding fashion. Abigail's family enjoyed evenings of sitting by the fire and discussing the public news of the day. When Abigail was about 10, the French and Indian War was taking place, and Abigail loved hearing about George Washington. Abigail and her sister, Mary, developed a love for reading foreign news that came in weekly. Unfortunately, due to Abigail's frequent health challenges, her mother did not want her to attend school for fear of contracting some illness. Therefore, it was the family library that she used to obtain her education. Her mother and grandmother also schooled she and her sisters in the ways of the women of the household. Abigail loved spending time with her father, though, tending the fields and caring for the animals. Her mother did not like the idea because she felt Abigail belonged in the home doing things that women should do. As a teenager, Abigail was permitted to go spend time with her aunt and uncle in Boston. It is here she began to develop some freedom and experience life in the big city. She developed some friendships during her time in Boston, which she continued through letter writing when she returned home. At the age of 17, Abigail first met John when he came to their home with another young man to make use of the Smith family library. John was 9 years her senior, an aspiring lawyer, and didn't give Abigail much of a glance, even though she developed into an attractive young woman. John began frequenting the home of the Smiths on business and found Abigail to be an unusual young woman. He often found her sitting quietly reading books, and when they engaged in conversation, he found her wit quite energizing. Abigail began to notice that John's rough outer shell was not all he was made of. He had a tender side and was often enthusiastic. John was quite different than Abigail, and that she loved books from an early age. He did not. He also did not want to attend Harvard to become a lawyer. As a teenager, he became an avid reader and developed the desire to go to college and began preparing himself for college. He attended Harvard University, where he graduated with a law degree. As a young man, at the age of 26, his father passed away, leaving him the family farm. He was a young lawyer, a man with some relative prosperity. His next step in life would be to marry. The relationship between Abigail and John developed slowly, but when the time came, he decided it was Abigail that he wanted to marry. Due to John's extensive travels as a lawyer and a fear of an outbreak of smallpox, John and Abigail spent an extensive amount of time apart, something that sadly would dominate their marriage. To pass the time, they would write letters. Abigail often felt she could say things to John in the letters that she couldn't say in person. On October 25th, 1764, at the age of 20, Abigail Smith married John Adams. This union was not looked favorably on by Abigail's mother. She considered John arrogant and rude. Parson Smith, Abigail's father, saw something admirable in John and readily gave his consent. It was he who performed the ceremony. The newly married couple set up their household in John's family home in Braintree, Massachusetts. John's father, John Quincy, used to take him to town hall when he was a young boy, and he learned the ways of the political world and developed an interest for politics. John and Abigail looked forward to the weekly newspaper to hear of the things that were going on in England, and they would share political ideas. His law practice began to grow, and it would often take him away from home to attend the Superior Court in Boston. It was during one of these trips, early in their marriage, that Abigail gave birth to their first child, Abigail, nicknamed Nabby, in 1765. During their marriage, John and Abigail welcomed a son, John Quincy, in 1767, Susanna, in 1768, who later died in 1770, Charles in 1770, Thomas in 1772, and a stillborn baby girl named Elizabeth in 1777. When news of the King's Stamp Act reached Boston, John became angry and declared the issue unconstitutional and began to fight on behalf of the country. The Stamp Act was repealed in 1766. John's involvement in politics carried him away more frequently than Abigail and the children would have liked, but John was rising to popularity, and Abigail did not want to stand in his way. On his brief periods at home, they would host parties and entertain guests such as Mercy Otis Warren. Abigail and Mercy began writing letters to each other. In 1774, John was invited to attend the First Continental Congress. He expressed feelings of inadequacy to Abigail. Abigail was proud of her husband, but little did she know that during this phase of their life, they would spend little time together in their home. Because of this, she became the manager of the household, attending to the farm, overseeing John's law practice, and keeping up with the family finances. These were tasks that were not generally assigned or permitted to be done by a woman, but John trusted her and none other. She became knowledgeable in the finances, even making some wise investments. While we could spend hours examining their lives, John's advancement in politics, his travels with John Quincy to France for nearly 5 years, and his campaign and election for vice president and later president, I want to turn now to the influence of Abigail. John and Abigail were consistent letter writers, Abigail writing to John almost daily. It is said during their marriage that they exchanged approximately 2,000 letters. A copy of these letters can be found on the Library of Congress website and both Abigail and John's historical websites. The letters are very moving, romantic, and in one particular letter, John concluded in his letter, "The conclusion of your letter makes my heart throb more than a cannonade would. You bid me to burn your letters, but I must forget you first." An article written by G. J. Barker Benfield, entitled Stillbirth and Sensibility, details the experiences of John and Abigail on the stillbirth of their final child. John was hoping for a boy, Abigail for a girl. The letters are at times heart-wrenching, but it reveals not only their character, but their immense love they had for one another. It was through these letters that they developed a strong political position. John welcomed Abigail's thoughts and ideas. When elected as president, John and Abigail moved into the White House, where Abigail became a prominent figure. She held meetings, brunches, and dinners. She was very dignified and at the same time outspoken. John's peers were receptive to Abigail's conversation and her demonstration of knowledge. One quote that is so familiar to us is when Abigail told John, "Don't forget the ladies." Even after John left the White House, she continued letter writing to John's colleagues. Abigail Adams is what I would call a forerunner. She didn't let others tell her she could or she shouldn't do something. She just did. She believed that women should have the same rights as men, and that she wasn't afraid to say so. Her letter writing ability is another thing she is known for. She criticized herself early on, feeling she did not possess the skills necessary to be considered a voice in literary ideas. But that is not the case. Today, we can still read the beautiful letters and feel the pain and agony they suffered all those years apart. Abigail Adams died October 28, 1818, at the age of 73. John Adams died July 4, 1826, at the age of 90. Their lives and legacy live on in history more than 200 years later. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.